For every one step this show takes in the correct direction of winning me over, it takes two to say, never mind. Hello, everyone. Terrence here with Hollywood Already Did It. If you haven't already, go ahead, like, share, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, ring that bell below. Anytime that we have something, you will be among the first to know. The third episode of the Big Cigar is here. It's called Guns and Matzah. After finishing this episode, I think I'm able to now pinpoint my big overall issue with the show. I mentioned it a little bit in the previous review, but the show has a habit of taking very serious and weighty situations and then just jump cutting, either going to a flashback or shooting it in a way where that scene loses any and all weight that was behind the thesis of it. This episode deals a lot with paranoia, and for some pieces of it, it handles it well. But in the same token, it every time it's like, oh yeah, oh no, that happens a lot in this. There's a sequence in particular I will mention. We'll get into it more and thorough in the breakdown, but there's a scene that happens where Huey is of the belief that his room is bugged, and he is paranoid. He's freaking out. He's ripping out everything. He's going through everything. He's pulling out wires out of the thing. And it turns out that he is correct. He is being bugged. And it's such a great sequence of events that sort of describe the descent into paranoia. It's undercut by a shot that in the same holding frame, it splits the wall and goes from one neighbor to the next neighbor to show that the feds were listening the whole time. It's got these hippie uh, implants who are pretending to be hippies, but they're doing hippie-esque things as neighbors next door, smoking weed and getting high with everything. It The things don't juxtapose. It's not clean. It's not keeping the weight of what is happening in one room. Those should be two completely different shots. It should be, and I particularly think that the shot of the hippie should be done differently, to sort of just add a little bit more gravitas. It just feels the way that this show is shot, sometimes with the overlays of years in like 1978 LA. It feels like we're shooting Ocean's 11, which I love those movies, but the tone of those movies is very different than what I think that they're trying to achieve here. And so there's a lot of times where the weight of what is happening here is missed in the way that they shoot things. And some of the times I feel like the weight, I'm adding the weight on it being a person of color who understands and has studied the Black Panthers, who knows who they are. I'm coming with more knowledge than I think this show willing is giving and willing to sort of sit in some of the muckiness of who and what they are. That's sort of how I feel about the show. So know that going in as we talk about episode 3. So this episode begins right where the last one left off, where Huey is on the run with Steve's vehicle. He stole it after the flight didn't take place. He didn't get the jet to go off from the airstrip that they built, so he just kind of takes the car, goes over a joyride, and he gets pulled over by a police officer. The officer here pulls him over, asks him to step out of the car, but apparently he does not recognize that he is Huey. And Huey happens to already have ID that is different. It's a different name. It's a fake name. And he's sort of freaking out at this point because the last time, remember that Huey, we saw that in the episode before, last time that Huey was pulled over by the police, a shootout took place, saying that he reached for his gun. So he was sort of having a moment of PTSD. The officer says, all right, well, you were speeding. I'm going to give you a ticket. And Huey says, thank you to the officer. Which the officer's kind of like, wait, what? And so for him, he's thankful to get the ticket versus either A, going to prison, or worse, being killed. So, needless to say, that ticket ain't being paid because that person that's on that ID doesn't exist. So Steve and Bert show up to sort of talk about what's going to happen next, because the Teo never showed up at the airstrip. They got to figure out the next plan to get the quote unquote package out of the States. So the idea is to have a meeting. They're going to go back to Steve's home, which Steve's girl not too happy about, and then regroup with the production meeting the next day to sort of decide what the next steps are. They meet, and the spot is already sort of hot. the feds are onto the spot. And so at that point, Huey's kind of just like, okay, well, here's the deal. I don't know who they're following. I don't know if they know. They clearly don't know that I'm here because they would already be barging in. So they're just trying to test where they can go. Let's all split up and go different ways. I'll stand back here, and then as they leave, then I will move out. Um, he again believes that no one knows he's here. So once they all split, they're going to sort of pick who they think is the most likely to have Huey and follow them behind. And then we find when they get back to Steve's place that the feds are also outside of Steve's place. They don't have a warrant to go in, so they have no justification to actually barge in, but they are watching Steve's place as well. We did get a flashback, and this is where I think some of the paranoia for Huey starts to set in because, like he said in the last episode, when he was released from prison, it was sort of a bad thing that his team, his people, were being split apart, and he was sort of looked at as a martyr for a lot of people. A lot of people looked up to him as this big beacon of hope, but the feds were doing everything possible to try to stop him. So he had the Fed coming from one way and then infighting within his own group that he sort of helped build coming. And so he was not sure of whom to trust on any side. And so, but he was still looking forward to moving forward to putting forth programs and whatnot for the community. He was opening up a free people's, like a food clinic for people in the community, and a pipe bomb goes off. Now he immediately, and Bobby Seals, they immediately think that it's Eldridge. And it's like, I thought we settled things with Eldridge. I thought he was cool. It's like, I thought you gave him a couple of chapters to sort of calm him down and settle him down. It's like, I thought he did too. I don't know what's going on, but something's amiss. And so it sort of makes that drive, that food shelter, seem a little bit sullied. The opening of it seem a bit sullied because there's still enough infighting that's happening between the Panthers that even they can't safely go to a community without thinking that, hey, these black folks are killing each other. It's something that I think still to this day sort of occurs, but it's the police and whatnot want infighting to happen to make it seem like they are a weaker group than what they actually would be if they decided to just work together. But the paranoia is coming. It's coming on heavy for Huey. He believes that death is imminent. He doesn't know where it's coming from or from which side it's coming from. He feels that there are people who are on the other side of the Black Panthers who feels that he cut a deal to get out, and that's why he was able to get out so freely. And so he doesn't really trust anybody outside of uh, the immediate core people that he sort of came up with, and Bobby being one of them. Teresa is another. Um, Speaking of Teresa, Hugh and Teresa decided to chop it up and catch up on about what the inner workings of the Black Panther movement. And they go to a movie theater. This is odd, and this just shows you some of the confusion about his paranoia. Some of it is brought on himself, but he's at a movie theater and he's talking throughout Shaft. Shaft is playing, but he's talking throughout it. And so people start looking at him and starting like, "What are you doing?" Because he's like in the third or fourth row back. He's just having a conversation in the middle of a theater, but they're just discussing how the Black Panthers are doing and how what's happened to all the people who were displaced from their homes based on the raids that were happening looking for him. And he's like, yeah, she's like, we're just out of money. We're starting to bleed money. We have people who don't think that you are the person to lead us anymore because they don't feel like you're the tough enough for it any longer. And he was kind of like, well, is that how you want to go? Do you want to go the tough way? And he's like, I don't know what I want. I just want something because right now we're dying here. Teresa really wants to be there for Huey, but she's like, my loyalty is to the Panthers as a whole, not specifically to just you. And she's like, well, Gwen, Miss Prissy Gwen, is your right hand. I'm on the front lines of all this stuff. Like I'm in it. I'm in the muck of it. People are not trusting me because I was your right hand, so they don't know where I stand. And so I just need something, a way to sort of take hold of the Black Panthers while we can, whether you're here or not. Sequence happens though, where a patron decides to sit right behind Huey in a pretty empty theater. Now I'm not going to lie to Huey, that's an annoyance of mine. If anybody knows that, like we have the AMC at the AMC A list. I'll pick a seat Cool. And there's nobody around my seat. And then for some reason, in a completely empty theater, somebody was like, I'm going to take the seat right next to him or like right in front of him. Why? Like I'd be paranoid too. Huey has a bigger reason to be paranoid because he's also on the run from the feds. And in that moment, he and the guy get into it. The guy says, like, I dare you to do something. He was, I'm cool. I'm going to punch him. Now, I don't think he's clearly not thinking rational at this point because you don't want to bring on um, the police or military presence or any eyes on you in that scenario. You don't want to bring it on yourself. Um, Although he may be smart enough to know that this is a movie of Shaft and a probably predominantly African American audience. The chances of police showing up here to dissuade fighting between two African Americans is pretty slim to none. So that might be why he did that, but it's still a very out of not the brightest thing to do. So this is when we learn that Eldridge was not the person behind the pipe bomb. There's a party occurring at Huey's apartment with Gwen and Bobby Seale, and they're all kind of just chilling. And he is just in his zone. Like he is freaking out. It's really well shot. Probably the best sequence that occurs until it's not. Um, but it's really well done. And it's him freaking out, sweating, going into the kitchen, taking a knife, which people are thinking like, oh God, he's crazy, he's about to stab something, and like trying to like cut open paintings to see if there's a wire behind it. And what he eventually does find is a wire in the lamppost. It's at that point that Huey's like, I want everybody out. Everybody but the two of you, I want them out. And Gwen's like, these people are fine. Like everybody's good. And then Huey brings up like, what about them white folks, them hippies from next door? And Gwen's kind of like, those hippies are fine. They were just over here smoking weed the other day. And clearly, we all know they are the ones who planted it. But it's this point when the scene changes from being pretty well shot to being like, okay, now this is too on the nose. Like, yeah, the hippies next door, who let's then show a cascading, a dolly shot. Thank you. A dolly shot to go through the wall and show on the other side of the wall where the hippies were listening and whatnot. It just doesn't work for me. It just comes off really cheap and cheesy. Um, and then just standing there, guy kind of almost like mustache twirling. They're just, I don't know, none of it sort of coalesces. And it takes all the heat and weight that scene was having with Huey and sort of just lets the air out of it, which sucks because I think that was probably the best sequence that I have seen so far in this show, and is the one time that I have felt any type of intensity. I think the show tries to put intensity in, but sometimes it's just so flashy and kind of like, oh, look what we can do with the cameras. Like, let's cut here, let's do a cut shot here, let's pull back here. Sometimes it's too much that any tension is just removed from the shot. That happens at the end of this episode, actually. We finally get a sequence between Steve and Bert where Steve sort of gets some cojones a little bit and reads Bert the Bright Act. Like, look, you're burning through all our money. We have no money. You told me that this movie we're working on is the final thing. Like this is the one, this is a great piece. One can get us an award. It does. But more importantly, it's saying something. It's going to stop the war. It's going to end the war. It's going to tell people that what we're doing over there is just ridiculous. And we've poured everything into it. You got your house mortgage. Like whatever we're doing, this needs to be our focus. I know you've promised us and said a lot of things about Hugh, and I know he's a friend of yours, but I was your friend first. You and I grew up together from the sandbox. Like, stop spending our money. This needs to be our focus. Bert doesn't listen. Bert uh, goes to Huey and gives Huey the money that he has sort of procured. Bert goes around and finds a way to get gets the cash flow. He goes to his brother originally. His brother's like, nah, go kick rocks. Go find that from another producer. He goes to another producer's sort of team. He asked for 200. They give him 100, but they give him 100 and a plane. So he's able to sort of up the ante a little bit. But instead of taking that 100 and putting it into the film, gives that straight to Huey. Huey then gives that to Teresa to sort of galvanize and sort of keep the Black Panthers afloat. He's not worried about himself. He's like, I just need to give this to the community so that they can give. So Bert is still doing his end goal is say, hey, no matter what, I want to be there for them to sort of fund them and keep them together. And so that's what he does. He's keeping his word there. So Huey gives that to Teresa, and Teresa kind of like, "Look, get to Cuba, work from there. I'll hold it down here, and sort of work in tandem of what to do next. But I need to sort of go and get the reins of what's going on for the party at the moment." Teo resurfaces, coked out of his mind. Look, I wouldn't give this guy money to do anything anyway. But yeah, he is coked out of his mind still. It looks like, but he is back, and he's sort of saying, "Hey, look, put me back in, coach. I got some people, and let's get this package to where we need to get it to." Bird's like, "Cool, let's do it," and she wants to set up a meeting so they can kind of get the cash back. Spurt's like, you left us high and dry. You took our money, give us our money back. Bert knows it's a setup though. Bert's like, something's not on the up and up. And he is, in a roundabout way, learned that Teo is involved in some shady deals. He got pinched and sort of trying to figure out what exactly it is. So Bert sends Steve to the cafe to meet with Teo with a couple of soldiers from the movement to sort of be backup for him to rough him up and get their money back. Um, Teresa goes to claim her sort of power, sort of her. I'm the lieutenant here, the Black Panther party. She goes in and nobody's really like though. There's this pimp looking dude. I didn't catch a name, but he's not giving her any type of time of day. He's just treating her like she is a piece of trash. So she and Gwen go in, and there's a couple of heavies that come in and just rough him up real quick, and then just sort of just realigns who the pecking order is with the Black Panther Party, at least in this chapter, and sort of allows them to continue on with the idea of what Huey wants as far as getting programs or whatnot off the ground, but still using a little force that Eldridge had to sort of at least keep the doors open and so that nobody's just punking them all the time. Bert goes to his ex's party, who his ex is Candace Bergen. It's a name they keep bringing up, and it's important for reasons I don't know, but it shows you how intertwined all of these famous people were in the segment around the Black Panthers, especially Huey. Um, he arrives, but his friend, who was sort of getting information about Teo and what was all going on, sort of intercepts him and says, "Hey, real quick, the feds are here." This is important. The feds try to get a warrant to go into Steve's place earlier in the show, and they were denied. So now they're choosing to sort of infiltrate this party and sort of use some trumped up charges on weed or whatnot to get a hold of Bert to sort of squeeze him. So Bert arrives at the party. She gives him the heads up like, "Oh, the feds are here looking for you." And Teo is more than just back. He's working with the mob. And so I would tread carefully when you're going to them. That's at that point Bert realizes that crap, I've just sent Steve into pretty much a mob hit. So he beelines it out of there. The feds, the hippie dude that I just feel like is out of an Archie comic book. It's like, oh no, and he chases after him. Um, and then we sort of see a sequence where Steve thinks he has the upper hand, starts giving Teo some crap. He stands up and starts talking crap to Teo. Teo shows him his gun, and then a shootout sort of ensues between Teo, who has two mob folks with him as backup, Steve, and the two Panthers. A shootout occurs, and then we see a shot of Teo, a close-up shot of Teo with the trigger, and we hear a gunshot go off. Now, that's supposed to be a tense scene. It's not for me because it's shot in a way that it's too many cuts, too many quick cuts going from one shot to another. I feel no intensity. It's also not because, unfortunately, I know unless they completely change the story, all in all, Steve dies much later in life due to complications from a hip issue. So it's sort of similar problems I have with prequels sometimes, where I'm like, these people are going to be fine. So you need to do a better job of creating the tension. This does not. And so the meat of the story here is the Black Panther piece and how they were trying to sort of stay afloat while Huey is on the run and sort of getting the intersperse of what Bert and Steve have to do to sort of make this all happen. Everything else was like a comedy of errors, and it sort of plays like that sometimes when I think it should be held a little bit more serious. So for me, where I just keep butting heads with this series is that I just the tones just don't mesh all the time. And there's a good series in there. I just think there needed to be a tonal and directorial shift at times to sort of tighten that up a bit. It's not directed poorly or bad. I just don't know if the way that it's directed versus the way that the script is and the story they're trying to tell quite merge all the time. But that was episode 3 of the Big Cigar. What did you guys think about this episode? Particularly, am I off in the tone shift question thing that I have? Specifically, the sequence where Huey is paranoid, and then we get the shot of does that work for you? It didn't work for me, but does it work for you? Because maybe I'm on a hill on my own. But what did you guys think? Go ahead and leave your thoughts and comments in the comments below. If you haven't already, you can follow us on Twitter at HollywoodADI. You can hit us up on email at HollywoodAlreadyDid@gmail.com. We also have a podcast with the same name. That's on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere that plays podcasts. We're there. And like always, I got my ticket. You got yours.